Good evening and welcome to the Government of Jersey's St Heliers studio for the final edition before the June election of Ask the Ministers. Over the next 2 hours, the floor is open to you to ask about the 4 years of this government. You may well wonder why this is being held so close to an election, and you may well be wondering what the government is doing to help households struggling with the rising cost of living. There's plenty to talk about this evening over the next couple of hours, so it'll be over to you to ask the ministers. Good evening and welcome to Ask the Ministers. My name is Chris Rayner and I was a broadcaster and journalist for many years. Tonight we're here for 2 hours to talk about more or less anything that you think is worth discussing. That could be the many twists and turns of the hospital project. It could be how the government handled the COVID-19 pandemic. Housing costs, fuel prices, the cost of your weekly shop. Those have all shot up with inflation standing at 6%. What should our ministers be doing to help islanders with those costs? Or you might want to know why, after postponing this event last month, they've gone ahead with it as we head into the pre-election or purdah period. Whatever you want to talk about, and if you're watching online, please use www.slido.com and the hashtag #AskTheMinisters. Those will be appearing up on the screens throughout this broadcast. There is a function on there where you can upvote questions so that the most popular ones get asked first. And we're going to jump around a little bit tonight, so we will try and keep it as focused as possible depending on who we have in the chairs next to me. So please send in your questions and I will try my best to make sure that they are asked. How they're answered, of course, will be down to our panel. And tonight we have the Chief Minister, Senator John Fondré, Deputy Chief Minister, Senator Lyndon Farnham, the Minister for Health and Social Services, Deputy Richard Renouf, the Minister for Children and Education, Deputy Scott Wickenden. And later on we'll have the Minister for Infrastructure, Deputy Kevin Lewis, and the Minister for Home Affairs, Deputy Gregory Guida. Well, good evening to our panel, and we will kick off with some questions from our people who are watching very shortly. I thought we'd first of all start by something actually that the Chief Minister said in the States earlier this week, in which he said that he thought that he would be leaving the organisation as we head into the election and the island in a good place. So my question to him and to all of you as we go round is, why do you think that's the case?
We've been through the toughest time I can think of, certainly in my lifetime, with obviously Brexit, with now the war in Ukraine, and particularly looking at the last 2+ years of COVID and the pandemic, which has been a global crisis. We've come out of that in terms of actually we protected lives. We've had less deaths actually in 2020 than normal. And very similar results for 2021. We protected livelihoods as much as we could. We have got something left in terms of the economy. In fact, the island's in a good place. And then in terms of the financial reserves and results, the fact that actually we've reported a surplus of £59 million for 2021 and reserves have gone up. So across all that spectrum, so that's people, it's economy, it's jobs, it's health, and it's financial. We are in a very good place going forward. It's been difficult. There's been some really tough decisions, as no doubt we'll touch on probably during the course of this evening. We've, as a team, come through this fantastically. We've also achieved a whole range of other changes. And as I said, if you treat us as custodians, handing over to the next council ministers to then hopefully build on the work we've done, I do genuinely believe we've done a lot, and we're handing over with a kind of good end-of-term report. It's not been perfect, it's been clear, but we've done a lot.
Out of your hands, of course, inflation, 6% we hear today, yep. And we've heard calls for things like fuel duty to be cut that could help put money back into islanders' pockets and help them with the spiralling costs I mentioned before. Why aren't you doing that? So 2 things on that. One is we have acted, don't forget, to help those at the bottom end of the income scale. So it's around £2 million is in the process of being paid out. I think it's either happening or is due to happen this week.
and that will assist, I think it's around 12,000 islanders. And that's the basic £20 a month payment that's been put through to everybody on, I think it's on income support, eligible pensioners, and those who who receive or eligible for what we used to call the GST food course bonus. I think it's the community bonus now. In terms of things like and so that's step one. Step two, in fact, Lyndon and I were in discussions again today about what other measures we can do, or what other measures, perhaps work that needs to happen for the next councilman to then be considering in, let's say, August, to then get people ready for, the coming winter. However, I think the other point, as you say, there have been calls about the drop in fuel, decrease in the amount of fuel duty, and to address that particularly, number one is, how do you guarantee that drop in fuel duty will actually go to the consumer, that it's not just absorbed by the retailers? And that is something actually the UK is having a problem with at the moment. And secondly, and certainly it affects me and everybody who drives a car, the range of fuel prices over here is something like between 30 and 30p a litre. So if I'm filling my car up, and I've got about, if I'm empty, near enough, it's about 50 litres. So it's an old estate car. That difference in price is £15 roughly. So I can make a choice, and I can go to garage number A, or I can go to garage number B, and depending which one it is, I'll pay £15 more than if I went to the other one. Now the point is, it's within our own hands then, rather than, so that's a 30p difference, rather than a 2.5p difference, which we can't guarantee will go to the consumer.
Most people understand that, and they will shop around. And I would say my filling my tank up of our car, it's gone up by 20 quid. And you could say, well, why don't you go down to the garage down the road? But what irks people is that you're getting GST on that, and you're getting, what is it, 2.5 pence extra, possibly, from the calculations that we've all seen. And you're making money from it, and you're not doing anything about it. You're not trying to bring that cost down. Well,
that money, certainly, as I said, is how do you guarantee that even if we took it all away, that the retailers would pass it on? Because we've had those arguments previously, all sorts of duties. Secondly, as I said, it's in our own control to go and save far more greater quantities. And thirdly, then, that would mean actually that the monies that do get raised, one of the options we were discussing even tonight was that actually do you look at that increase in income, and that means you then give it to islanders who need that assistance and do target, and you can target them. That's the options that we're asking officials to work on right now. Now, if they come in before the election, there's actually somewhere you can do that doesn't fall foul of things like purdah periods and the law and all that sort of stuff, then no doubt we would take a decision. But in reality, given where we are, it's likely to be something that will be ready there for the next council minister to pick up on day one. But don't forget, we have acted to assist those people who are most vulnerable. Okay. That's point one. And point two, as I said, is under our own gift to actually save ourselves considerably more. And if we all go to the garages that are a lot cheaper, it may encourage a load of other people to reduce their prices, and that will have a load of benefits elsewhere.
Okay, better move on. So, Senator Farnham, your economy is your brief, isn't it? So, how are you leaving the economy, and what state are you leaving it after 4 years?
I'm using my bike a lot more these days, Chris, I have to say. Well, I think, as the Chief Minister alluded to before, our economy has probably been through the biggest shock since the Second World War. And, given the amount of support we've had to provide to protect jobs and livelihood through the pandemic, we're thankfully in quite a reasonable position. The latest business tendency surveys showed some optimism. Although they were largely neutral, there was more optimism than there was pessimism in the forecast. Of course, the big challenge now is inflation, and businesses, while we're getting back on our feet following Brexit and the pandemic, of course, we're faced with rising costs. So that still remains a big challenge, and the Anti-Inflation Strategy Group are meeting regularly to put in place a number of actions that will help to alleviate those challenges. It's difficult because a lot of the inflation we're seeing are caused by global pressures. For example, the oil price is having a big impact on our economy right now, and there's very little we can do about that. I won't repeat Chief Minister's words about fuel duty and how we might help, but I actually believe rather than giving very small decreases in the price of duty on fuel, which could actually be swallowed up in margins. There's no guarantee they'll be passed on to the consumer. We should use that money. We should target it to the people that actually need it during these challenging times. And of course, some of the work we've been doing aim at ensuring that the government does understand the inflationary impact of taxes and duties. We aim to keep all of our government charges as low as we possibly can, as long as we are paying for the cost of providing the service, and we don't want to be charging too much more than that. And so we're preparing, we're moving along those routes now for this government and the next government to pick up on, to make sure we're providing as much help as we can to islanders during these tough times.
Are tough times. Have you created a situation where the economy is one where you're going to have people who've gone away to university to train elsewhere wanting to come back to the island?
Well,
because we hear they're leaving or are not coming back.
I very much hope so. We want a lot of our youngsters to come back. My daughter, for example, is here. She's teaching. She's come back. My son isn't. He's working in Europe. But he hopes to come back in the future. But while we export a lot of our younger people, our young academic talent, they go away to study. Some don't come back. We also import some very good talent to help run the island. So there is a balance.
Okay, just quickly, we've referenced to so many people struggling to survive in the island. This is a question we've been asked by, and it's now disappeared. Is this an island? I'll just trying to remember what it said then. Is this an island for landlords, for property developers and tax avoiders?
No,
is
not
that what
at
we've
all.
created?
No, absolutely not at all. It's an island for everyone. And previous governments, this government and future governments are going to have to prioritise improving the lives of islanders. And we tend to focus on GDP and GVA, and GVA can actually tend to measure everything that's not always the most important thing to islanders. And that's why we're putting a lot more focus now on the Better Life Index and using those measurements to gauge how we're doing.
Okay. Deputy Renouf, so it's been a tough couple of years for you and, well, for the people working in health and social services. Indeed. It's been unprecedented, hasn't it? So as you leave that role, how do you look back on those 2 years and, the 2 years leading up to it?
I've been working with incredible teams, people who have gone above and beyond and dedicated days, weeks, hours to their job, keeping the island safe. And I pay tribute to them because, and not just in health, but in the whole of the public service, I think, have seen the need to protect this island and have worked tremendously hard to implement new procedures, to get things organised very quickly. And the results has been that I believe we've come through the emergency phase of the pandemic in a good position. And
there are still obviously issues outstanding that we hear about, radiotherapy, the decision on whether that's going to happen, the hospital project, I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more into that. Mm-hmm. There must be a sense of frustration from you and mental health and the issues that have been raised about that following the scrutiny review. Must be some frustration from you that some of these things were not
Yes, obviously you would like so many things to have proceeded more quickly, and I'm sure had it not been for COVID, we could have made greater progress. But we have made progress, and the scrutiny report that's recently out acknowledges that we have made, in their words, limited progress on mental health. But COVID has made that more difficult, but it's still progress. The mental health services, when I started my term, were at a low ebb. We have greatly improved them. We've improved recruitment. We've improved the service. We have more community teams now. And it will continue improving. We have good leadership in there now. And it's a long haul. There's a lot of work to do, always in health, and it's constantly changing. But we are all the time responding to that change and seeking to improve.
Okay. Deputy Wickenden, you stepped into the role. You were an Assistant Minister at Education and Children's Department, so now you became the Minister. Looking back, now you've got coming to the end of your term. Have you left that department in a better place?
I believe I have, and I think there's a lot that this government, if you go to the premise of the first question, we've invested more money in sport, education, mental health, we've put more money into the arts and culture, lots of areas, technology that were so underfunded in previous terms of the Assembly. This government's put more money in. We've built the Kenneveigh School, which Princess Anne said is the best public school that she's ever opened out of the thousands that she's ever seen. We've done our family-friendly rights when I was the Assistant Minister for Social Security, with breastfeeding rights, with parental leave and 26 weeks worth of leave that goes on. We've put way more money into education to actually help fund the education system. We've kept the schools open and safe. The teachers have done, and teacher assistants, the staff have done an amazing job making sure that our children are safe and that they were safe within the restrictions in a very hard time, and keeping children engaged. And we've seen the results in our education system go up. So absolutely hats off to them in that way. I think we've done very well. I'm very proud of where we've got to, about the investment that we've done within the education system, children's services, through a very, very difficult time. And I definitely will be leaving this term with my head held high with the achievements that we've done.
Okay, we're going to start going to some of the questions that we've been sent in. One of them is one for you, Chief Minister, because you've been sort of boxing around this issue for a couple of months now, at least 2 months. A couple of days ago, you said you'd make an announcement about whether you were standing again.
I will be making an announcent. I'm hoping to do it.
It was a couple of days ago, you said you'd be making an announcement in a couple of days.
Yep.
That's
so
today.
It'll be sometime during the course of this week.
Okay.
So I know it's, look, I will do the announcement when I'm ready to make it, and do it in the right way.
You kind of hinted, though, with your answer to the question in the States the other day that you would be, because you said you...
I said
You'd
I've got no,
ruled out
I've,
going.
I've
You
got no
hadn't quite
present
ruled
intention
out.
to
No
stand
intention
for
of
Chief
being
Minister again.
but it depends.
I said I've got no present intention to stand for Chief Minister again.
Okay, so there's been some criticism about holding this event tonight. So it was due to happen last month. It was postponed. It's happening now. We're right up almost to the wire of when we should be in the pre-election period, where events like this shouldn't be happening because it's electioneering, or could be seen as electioneering.
Well, I think.
Why have we gone ahead?
Well, I think actually in your preamble you kind of touched on it, because we've got a number of events that are going on at the moment, cost of living issues. Fundamentally, you were right. By the way, we were meant to schedule it in March. For various reasons, that didn't take place. And to be honest, bear in mind we've been through what has been, I think, sometimes described as an extraordinary 4 years. That we did feel it was right to do one final one. And please also bear in mind, it is a States Week. So this is normal government business happening. I mean, there are a number of people who want to make mischief and want to accuse us of all types of things. And generally, those are the ones who put all the negative rubbish out there.
Is a natural reaction as soon as you see it's coming up.
This is part
so close to elections.
Yeah, but that's called cynicism, I'm afraid. Okay? And the trouble is that actually we've done quite a lot of good in this island. We leave the island in a good place. And frankly, if the most tricky question we're going to ask tonight is, why are we doing this a few days? Well, actually, it is a States Week. So on that basis, do we not do any further press releases? Do we not do any more debates? Mm-hmm. Do we stop the backbenchers who have suddenly come up with urgent issues that they've taken 4 years to suddenly come across, and that's not, and they're perfectly innocent on that front? So actually, we thought, it's as a government, we've done 4 years. Let's give the public the final chance, bearing in mind it was meant to happen in March, and yes, it's slightly later than normal, but it is a normal States Week this week.
So there is a question here about whether you think it's appropriate for taxpayers to be funding this political event, is what the questioner has put just days before the election period kicks off. Following what you've said, is there value in this? Is there value in holding these?
It's a tricky...
Because these started sort of during the pandemic.
Well, the way
I'd
put it this way, let me put it this way around. When we first, I think it was in 2019, and we were doing the Common Stewardship Policy document, which is usually there's a parish hall roadshow, and you go around. I think we went to 5 areas, and I can't remember if you all remember, but we had about 20 to 40 people turn up. The following year, particularly in the middle of COVID, and we did 5 days on the on the government plan. In that week, I think we had 10,000 people or 10,000 accounts registered that came in and watched. Now, these things will fluctuate up and down, and sometimes people then come in and watch, or they'll watch 5 minutes or whatever it is. But actually, in terms of the engagement, it's significantly more effective, and that's been our lesson, and that's been one of the lessons that comes out of COVID. It's far more effective way of actually getting some direct feedback and direct contact with the public, and they can ask us. Obviously, we will get some interesting questions, I'm sure, from particular directions, but hopefully, genuine people with genuine issues can also log in through Slido and send us some decent and ask us something that's pertinent to them, hopefully in the wider context. And that's what it's meant to be about. We will always be learning from these. So there'll always be things that will change. I think it's a big change compared to 4 years ago.
Iris has touched on this because she's said that you said in 2018 that you were well aware there is public disillusionment with the states, particularly in decision making, and a failure to engage properly with the people. So how do you think the public feel now?
Well, I think on this point, it's always difficult to tell in terms of how the public feel right now, because it depends if you base your judgment purely on social media, which I don't, because I think social media can be quite vicious at times. Whereas alternatively, I judge it by real people I meet in the street, who generally come up to me and say, I wouldn't have wanted your job, you've all done a really good job, and well done. So, and how you match those two is really difficult. But if you're looking at public engagement, the fact that we are doing this, and as I said, the fact that during the whole 3 years, we've engaged with thousands of islanders, quite literally, and the people behind it could even give you the statistics, I'm sure, versus the 20, 30, 40 people you get at a parish hall roadshow type of thing. I think that demonstrates we have tried to do something different. I can't control, fairly obviously, how it's reported or what some of the people who are in a very negative sphere think of it, and that's why sometimes I definitely don't look at social media. But I think from an engagement point of view, we've tried something different, and we'll see what the overall feedback is.
Okay, let's move on to a topic now. Let's move on to housing. We've got some questions on that, and these are questions for all on the panel. So we'll give you a bit of a rest, Chief Minister. So the question is: since the last Ask the Ministers, a one-bedroom flat is now more than £350,000. In fact, a one-bedroom flat with a parking space can be over £425,000, unless they have wealthy parents. Why should a young person stay in Jersey? Deputy Wickenden, do you want to start us?
So, Jersey has always been an expensive place. I remember when I left school thinking I'm never going to be able to afford to buy somewhere. I know it's definitely feeling a lot worse now than when I was younger. I had a young gentleman I spoke to who was quite disillusioned just the other night, who was talking about why should I stay in Jersey and why shouldn't, and I had to explain to him, actually there is a lot of work going on in the background. We've had a very conflated, with the interest rates being very low, we've had a lot of people that have, instead of having their money in the bank, have decided to go into property and get better interest rates out of there. Russell Abbey is doing massive of work in the background right now to get developers and landlords into a place where they'll be offering better deals for younger people. So the work is carrying on. I think Jersey's a really, really lovely place to grow up. It's safe. I think everyone should go away for a bit if they can and go and see other parts of the world and come back. My brother's just recently come back to the island with his family. But I would just ask children not to give up hope yet. There is a lot of work going on right now. This has happened. We see the problem that we're in, and there is a lot of work with developers. There's a lot of work with landlords. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes right now to start bringing this into a place where there is hope.
Deputy Renouf, I mean, your parishioners, I'm sure, will want to stay in the parish. They want to be able to afford to buy something in St. Juan. Is the island doing enough to help them?
It was a matter of regret to me that the states decided not to rezone fields, which the parish was supporting, for an assisted purchase scheme, because that is going to be the only way some of St. Juan's parishioners or young people who have links with St. Juan's, or indeed most of couples in the island, will be able to afford their own home. But the island plan did produce some sites that are going to be used for assisted purchase, and we've got to use those, and we've got to roll out that scheme to those who need homes. We've got to provide affordable homes, whether rental or assisted purchase, to young people in the island, to keep this island, sustain this island.
Senator Farnham, is that the answer? I mean, we've got 4,000 properties lying empty, according to the census.
I think this is, and I've said it before, this is the biggest challenge we face as an island. Maybe 2 years ago I wouldn't have said that. I would have said it's a challenge, but not the biggest challenge. The island plan went a long way to actually putting the rezoning in place. I think we've agreed to rezone somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 land for 3,000 and 4,000 new homes, which will be of tremendous help. But of course, the key is affordability. So those of us that are lucky enough, or I say lucky, have worked hard and we own our own homes, well, that's fine, because the price of homes are going up, and it doesn't mean we're making money. It's just the price of comparison homes are going up as well. But what we have to do is give some hope to our young people, those you mentioned who have gone away to university and can come back. They can look at what they can buy for 500,000, say, in the UK, and what they can buy here, and of course they can buy more. But we must remember that Jersey is a safe, clean a place, and when you compare ourselves to other towns and cities around Britain and Europe, you have to bear that in mind. And the key is not only increasing the supply of homes, but also making sure we provide the means for young people to get into those homes, to buy their own homes without having to raise huge deposits. I'm firmly in favour of providing 100% loans to young people, much longer periods to repay mortgages, flexibility in those periods. So if you run into hard times or challenges during your mortgage period, you can suspend your mortgage and perhaps pay a small rent until you get back on your feet, and gradually build your equity over, say, a 30 or 40 or even 50-year period. And these are the kind of this is the direction we're going in. Russell Abbey, the housing minister now, is progressing this and has made great steps, and the new government has to pick up where we've left off and keep the momentum going, because we can get this back on track, and we can give our young people hope, but we have to just put them into homes and give them the support to buy their own homes.
Can
Okay.
I also make quite an important point,
Okay.
actually, because there's sometimes inference that we've not been doing anything. Now, Felix, I think we all recognise as well, and Lyndon, Lyndon's referenced his children. I know where my children are and the challenges that will be coming down the line. So we all recognise the problem we have. One of the biggest solutions to this is actually getting land that can be built on. And so there's no instant solution. I can't turn the key tomorrow and say, voila, and here we go. But what we have been doing, and hopefully Chris, as he walked in tonight, you saw that Cyril and Marcon's just pretty well been flattened. That is what we call the office estate. That, when it goes up in 2024, will release land that states own, which can be used for housing. The health estate, we will know probably in the next, let's say, 2 months, whether we have an application that's going to be approved on the hospital. If that is the case, then by 2026, various sites within the health estate will be released for housing. We have the schools estate that Scott and I have been talking about, and we'll be putting something out about that. And that in itself has the potential, again, with providing new facilities, to free up old sites. So there's a whole range of areas there that actually, because these things take time, are the ones almost we've been clearing away, even whilst we've been dealing with COVID. And please do not underestimate the 2 years and the impact that's had on everything we've wanted to do. On top of that, SOJC South West of St Helier is about 1,000 units. The Port's master plan is between 500 and 1,000 units, and Andium was seeking to build about 3,000 units. That's by about 2030. So actually, when we talked about hope, that isn't an empty promise. There is a lot of stuff that we're putting in, but to get that pipeline coming through, and the oil, if you like, environmentally wrong expression, the oil to come out, you've got to build it first. On top of that, you've also got products that SOJC and Andium do, which is to help people. And on top of that, Russell, for example, Russell Abbey, is working on final pieces that he wants to put in place around actually other controls. And that includes, now I made electoral commitments around external buy-to-let. That as a policy stopped within SOJC in, I think it was 2019. States ratified that later. We've actually stopped new share transfer being formed, and my expectation is that officers will then be working on legislation that new councillors will bring through. They'll then tighten up again. So we have been putting some of these long-term things in place, but obviously COVID and other matters have also then created this kind of perfect storm. But I think the message to say is, yes, we have a problem now, but I think there is a real, I'll say, when I say hope, a real tangible prospect that actually over the next few years this will get sorted because of a lot of the actions we've taken, and obviously then the next councillors will have to build on that.
Okay. Well, we had a question about vacant properties just come up, and whether or not you were going to tax, or not you thought taxing them would be an incentive for those who own properties to actually do something with them.
Well,
There's other alternatives, though, aren't there, such as
the Assembly
providing loans?
had quite a long debate around that either yesterday or the day before, and I think from what I understood from what the connotables were saying, for example, there's that you might look at something around rates and what have you to encourage at a right time. What we've got to remember is that I think it's a very easy number to say. The trouble is we don't actually fully know all the details as to why properties are vacant. But of the ones where we have some data, I think it's around 50-60% are because they're either being sold, or actually it's between tenants. So essentially tenant one is left, they're probably going to be refurbished, and then new tenants are coming in. So they're not all just sitting there for year on year vacant. There's a churn going on, which is what you'd expect. I think the queries will be is if you've got a property that's actually been sitting there 3 or 4 years, as to whether then there needs to be incentive. We've agreed that. We were supportive of that piece of work being done. Again, that'll be something new councilmen can pick up on. But it is one of those you have got to be careful around. It's not as simple as some people may think, i.e. there's 4,000 homes sitting there empty for, let's say, 3 years, and that will solve all the problems. If it does assist, that would be brilliant.
Okay, we've got lots and lots of topics to cover tonight. We've got probably 3 more questions on housing, and we'll try and get through those before we move on to health and then the hospital. And if you look on your screens, you've got www.slido.com, Ask the Ministers. So if you do want to ask a question, please use that facility. Why didn't this government see an accommodation crisis for seasonal workers coming? And what does it say about the island as an offshore finance centre when working people have to use food banks and the shelter just for a bed for the night? There's a couple of different questions there, but Senator Farnham, we've had the debate today about accommodation for seasonal workers. It didn't go the way that the proposer wanted, and it's a tricky issue, isn't it? And there's a lot of pressure now on existing housing stock, and there will be for seasonal workers.
And it's a difficult juxtaposition as well, because we have to find a solution to that without it compounding on the challenges we have with housing for the local market. Of course, the days have gone now, and I think we can no longer expect people who want to come and live and work in Jersey for however long, whether it's a season or they decide to stay here, can live in what we would now all term substandard accommodation. And so, of course, it's always been a challenge for the hospitality sector, but of course views have changed on how we house people. Back in the heady days of tourism, when we had 30,000 beds and everybody was on full board, then many people were. It was common for households to take lodgers in and take workers in, seasonal workers in, and put them in their own homes, and bed sits and other sorts of accommodation that we might consider not appropriate now were provided. Of course, since Brexit and the pandemic, things have changed considerably. Whilst we've seen approximately 4,000 people leave the island, as the census results have shown us, as the tourism sector and other sectors, not just tourism, it's other important sectors of the economy, are beginning to bounce back and restructure themselves for the recovery period, then of course the demand for accommodation is going up. There's no quick solution. I think there's some good innovation and some good ideas coming from the business sectors. It's a medium to long-term solution, and that is taking a close look at our planning laws and our building regulations to allow bespoke key worker, good quality key worker accommodation to be built.
Okay. We are going to encourage you all to be brief because we've got loads of things coming in. But if we can address the second half of that question, which was about food banks and people using that using those in a relatively wealthy island. Deputy Wickenden, as Children's Minister, as people, and Education Minister, as people move through and move on into their adult lives, they're finding it hard to to feed themselves. Young families are finding it hard to. Does that concern you as somebody who has been dedicated to young people in the last couple of years?
It definitely does, and it's where I really wish we could have gone further on with putting school meals in, so that we know that there are some children in this island, and it shouldn't be the case, but it is, that aren't getting a hot, nutritious meal every day. And that's why one of my passions has been to try and start moving forward. I wish it was easier. I wish we could have, when schools were built back in the 70s or the like, when they were built, that they were built with areas where we could serve food to children in a modern health and safety manner, but we're going to have to start building some extensions on schools, and we have to start moving things around to make that happen. But for me, it's a real passion, and I really want to take my hat off to Caring Cooks, the charity that have been helping us to make sure that there's educational programmes and there's food being delivered to the schools, that we have been able to do it. But hopefully by the end of this year, we will have food serveries in every primary school, so we can help make sure that children are fed and they do have a nutritious meal every day, and also so that families in the morning aren't rushing around trying to make lunch boxes. They can spend a bit more time, kind of get ready and take that stress away.
Use of food banks?
Sorry?
Does it shock you?
It does.
To hear that?
I wish we were able to get better information on it. I really do. It would be really, really helpful to understand a lot more, that people have a right to their privacy, but it does shock me, yes, Chris.
Okay. Quick question on to continue the housing. So we've got 8.3% vacancy rate of the island's 48,000 private dwellings. It's a surprise. It's been a surprise to many people having that figure. Perhaps not. I think some similar figures are slightly lower in the previous census. But these are only taken every 10 years. Deputy Renouf, do you think they should be more regular? Held more regularly? It's difficult to do, obviously.
A census is a huge operation, but we should try and get the best data on a regular basis. So if we do need some means of assessing unoccupied property, we might be able to do that through the rating system. And we must remember, this is a snapshot in time of accommodation that was unoccupied that night. They're not necessarily permanently vacant properties, and I think we're going to receive more information.
It's interesting that, though, because it was done during lockdown when everyone was here, and they had to be here.
Yeah, well,
during the pandemic.
Or some people had left, particularly transient workers, perhaps.
But those that would be here were here.
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
We are actually technically doing it. And the reason I say that is I think we can give a commitment. Because we've had various debates around landlord registers and property registers and things like that. And the Assembly made a decision around a property register. No one particularly wanted to run with it. So actually at the beginning of this, I think it was the beginning of this year, I put some money aside out of one of the budgets I look after, and that's about setting up the IT, so the technology, which will have a regular and valid and up-to-date list of all properties on the island and who lives in them, and there'll be other data that come through that. And on that basis, my assumption would be it will therefore have a far better grasp of vacant properties. So I can't give you a time frame because I suspect a lot of these things we find is whether the systems talk to each other and all the practical stuff. But there is money put aside, which is that first step of scoping the whole thing to then say, this is an IT project that we're launching. So from my perspective, I would anticipate that, let's say, I'm going to say, no, actually I won't put a time frame because then you're going to say a day later, why didn't you do it? But within a medium period of time, we will be able to do that. And at that point, we'll then be able to do it more than a damn sight more regularly than 10 years. Okay. I would hope, to be honest, I would hope every quarter at the very least.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to our hospital, the hospital project. Deputy Chief Minister, it's your project. Do you regret taking it on, especially with an election around the corner? We have been asked.
Well, Chris, I have to say it seemed like a good idea at the time. And of course, I've been in the States as a senator. Well, I was first elected in 1999 and then had a break from 2005 to that. Came back as a senator, and over the last 10 years, I've watched with another number of other members and a number of many disbelieving islanders that the state's continued failure to actually find a solution and drive the project forward. I I knew it was a poison chalice when I took it on, but I took it on because members, to be honest, weren't queuing up to do it, and it had to be done. Somebody had to do it. The Chief Minister very kindly asked me to take charge of the project, and I'm not in this. I'm not a states member and asked to represent the people to necessarily always be popular, but you have to be prepared to make the tough decisions.
Have you been popular with the deputy to your right, though, the health minister, who's
Well,
been dying for
we don't always
this to
agree.
be resolved?
I think, and I can say this from my perspective, with ministerial colleagues, assistant ministers, scrutiny, and other states members, we have a very productive working relationship. And just because we don't agree, in fact, we sometimes really vigorously disagree. We tend to all be doing it for the right reason, and that is to produce the best results for islanders. And we need a new hospital, and we've seen it. People didn't want it in town. The clinicians and the hospital staff said, you can't rebuild on Gloucester Street while you're running a hospital. Then we thought of People's Park, and of course 1,000 people demonstrated, and we're going to lay down in front of the builder. A public poll was conducted a number of years ago in Overdale with the #1 site. We went through a process that I hope the planning process will vindicate. We came up with Overdale, and I think we've got a tremendously solid plan for a really fantastic hospital for the future. And I don't regret leading the project.
So, new hospital quoted cost £800 million. That was before COVID, the questioner asked. Obviously, this cost must now be higher due to the cost of materials, labour, etc. So what's the quoted cost now? Is it still the same?
The target is still the 804 million. That includes over 100 million of contingencies. We have been delayed by propositions. For example, I believe the Constable of St Helier, with the very best intentions, are quite right to debate this, lodged a proposition on the road access that put 2 or 3 months onto the timescale. But it's not. I just like to say I haven't personally chosen the site. The States Assembly chose the site. The States Assembly chose the access. The States Assembly democratically selected, agreed the budget and the process, and I was charged together with the oversight group, who have been really, really strong through this, and all the officers to deliver, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And that's why we've had to run a number of these important issues in parallel to get it over the line and delivered, finished by 2025, fully operational by 2026. If we don't get a planning approval, then we won't be able to hold on to the 804 million budget. It's going to go up, but we can still do it if we get this through.
Okay. Question for Deputy Renouf. You said that you were keen for transparency on waiting lists when you were first elected as the Minister. Can you explain why the public waiting list data on gov.je has not been updated since December last year? Now, it's now 3 months out of date.
Yes, we release a quarterly report, and that report is ready now to come before the Health and Community Services Board, which is meeting next week. It's a meeting held in public, at which we invite the partners we work with, the GPs, the charitable bodies working in health, and HCS officers, and we discuss that report. We interrogate its authors, and we highlight areas of concern, and then that report is placed on the website. So it'll be up to date as to March, but it goes formally to a board which meets in public as part of our governance system.
Okay. Another question for you. When will you provide IVF services in the island, or when will the health service do that? Couples have to go through going to the UK when not all are able to. When Jersey could be provided here and Jersey could benefit from that profit. The questioner says it's sad to see the little effort being given to this by the department.
So there is significant effort going into the IVF service. It is a very special service and is vital for young families in those difficulties. It is a complex area, and we do have to partner with a clinic in the UK. But it's certainly something that we have provided a service for decades. And we will continue to. There's absolutely no doubt it is an essential, key part of the island's health service. I am very keen, though it hasn't yet come forward, to increase the financial threshold at which this service can be made available. Because there is a threshold, but it's now quite low, at which we would provide it free of charge, after which there are certain charges that people are asked to pay. We need to update that, and there are proposals which will be taken forward by the next health minister.
Picking on you again, with so many health workers leaving the island, how are you going to address the root cause of the problem, as it surely can't be cost effective bringing agency nurses in all the time, and the services must suffer having so many inconsistencies?
We have been able to reduce our reliance on agency staff, so we now have more substantive posts filled, but it is an issue, because agency staff do cost a significant amount, because you have to pay the agency commission as well. But we have to acknowledge that there will always be times when staff leave, and before we can fill that post, we have to cover with a locum or an agency nurse. And there are shortages that arise in staffing levels, and we need to cover that. So it's fortunate that we have that, and health services across the Western world do rely on locums and agency staff. And we mustn't think that they offer an inferior service. They are excellent practitioners, and they have to comply with the same standards that everyone else works to.
Okay, we're going to move on to some questions on education. Thank you. Children education now. So, Deputy Wickenden, this is a question from the Jersey Student Loan Support Group, and they're asking why the student finance maintenance grant details that you gave in questions without notice at the last sitting have not yet appeared. No ministerial decision has been published, and if this will be in place for this September. If so, do you know the amount, as you weren't sure in the Assembly?
So, by the end of this week, the ministerial decision will have been written up, and I'll sign it at the end of this week. And the amount is a 2.9% increase in the maintenance grant on the university fees. So that's it.
Okay, so I think the questions were around in the Assembly, weren't they? How they were going to link into the cost of living in the UK, which is higher than that, isn't it?
So we've linked it into a raise. We have to make sure it's affordable. We've got to remember that our university grants that we go over here isn't like the UK. We don't ask for the money back. We don't put students into debt. We give money to make sure that children can go to university, and we fund that. We've put the maintenance grant up by 2.9% because it's affordable. It gives some surety to the students that there is more money for their living costs within the university.
Okay, we've got about just over 11 minutes with the Children Education Minister and the Health Minister still before we swap over. We'll stay with education now. The scrutiny panel hearing last year, the governors of Hope Valley Schools stated that the government had broken its pledge on putting children first due to the lack of support for teaching staff. Has the promise of putting children first been maintained over the past 4 years?
Yes. We've put more money into our children's services, into education, to health, than any government previously before. We raised 11.4 million more. There was a deficit within the school funding. We've got rid of that funding. We've been funding the COVID, and that carries on as well. So absolutely, I think we've put a children's minister in, which I am now, and it started with Senator Sam Messick. We've got a children's commissioner. We're putting in stronger regulations for the care commissioner and the likes. We absolutely have been putting children first, and I'm very proud of how we have in this government. Okay, thank you. So there's some more general questions. I think we'll go around the panel with this. Interesting one, this, and I saw this when I was looking on Slido earlier today. And somebody's asked, will any of you who are standing be declaring the cost of this broadcast on your election expenses?
I think I've answered that question. The short answer is no.
Haven't told us whether you're standing or not. But
If I was.
obviously, I'm not going to ask everybody's intentions now unless they've already declared. Senator, have you declared whether you're...
If I can answer that question, I think these broadcasts, the Ask the Ministers originally started during the COVID period to help share information and in answers, and subsequently kept going because the public demanded more opportunity to put the government on the spot and question the ministers. And regrettably, we currently have 93 people watching us, which is not a great deal. But I hope many people will watch the recordings. So I'm not holding my breath. It's budgeted for. It's part of the government communications plan, and we're operating as part of the government term. We're not in the purdah period. We have a purdah period, or on repos as we're going to call it, and that's when we stop this kind of thing. I think it's a States Week, and it's the last opportunity to put ministers on the spot. So I don't think there's any reason for any member to declare on their expenses. The answer is no.
93 is actually probably more than we would get in the parish halls when we've done it in real time, in real life.
Well, unless it's standing room only. Anyway. In the view of each panel member, what is the single most significant thing this government has done for women in the last 4 years? Chief Minister, let's start with you.
That's going to be an interesting one. Things like increasing parental leave. Within the organisation, we've done a lot around, we have what we call an I Will campaign, which is about promoting leadership amongst the senior leaders and next tier down, as it were. And that's about getting that wider experience. And that also goes wider into diversity and things like that. Apologies, I'm thinking through. We've also been doing, although this is more around the children's side, but obviously they correspond. So things like with an income support, the children's component has been quite significantly increased. Can't remember the exact percentage. It's either 17 or 20% increase during our time. And I'll stop there. I wouldn't want to steal anybody else's thunder, actually.
Okay.
But,
So Deputy Renouf, what's the single most significant thing?
I'd say women are significant users, of course, of health services. And in health services, we've had to modernise, and we've had to set standards and bring services up to standards and quality. And we're now measuring what we do to give greater assurance to patients, women included, of course. And so women can rely on that we have an improving health service, still with many challenges, but we're facing up to those challenges and are ready to make the changes necessary.
Okay, Deputy Wickenden.
I do too, because I think that the Amazing Early Years team with the app that's 50 things to do before you're 5 for parents to go and engage with their children around the island and use this beautiful island, I'm really proud, and that was using COVID money. But recently, free sanitary products for women in schools was something that I think I'm really proud of doing. It was absolutely the right thing to do to find the money to get that put into the schools. There's going to be changes to it in the future to make sure there's sustainable products that will be available. But I think that's something that's absolutely right, because women's shopping lists are much more expensive than men's, and it shouldn't be a cost.
Okay. Senator Farnham.
Oh, I thought you were going to leave me out. Well, I use this opportunity to just go back to the hospital and say the new hospital designs include unprecedented new space and facilities, a separate facility, because it's not just a general hospital, a number of hospitals in one for women, maternity and children, with separate entrance, a better privacy, and a whole section of the hospital dedicated to those services.
Okay. So following on from that, there are no women on the panel for the whole of this evening.
Easy answer. Deputy Martin was meant to attend. She unfortunately has tested positive for COVID. Is highly annoyed because she was very much looking forward. She was genuinely looking forward to taking part. She's also annoyed and she's hoping she'll test negative in time to actually attend the Assembly in its last sitting. Deputy Lavia unfortunately was not available. She was invited. And I have to say, I can't remember what happened by the time we got to the Treasury Minister. But no, it was anticipated. And
She's got a young family.
yes.
But split-wise across council ministers, gender-wise, it's still majority of men, isn't it?
You have to remember that when we started, we've obviously lost one or two in this time. I was the person who had nominated the first female Deputy Chief Minister, and obviously, and also, in fact, with the greatest respect to Richard, is I also nominated a woman for post of health minister. The Assembly took a different decision. We have worked incredibly well together, by the way, but I just make the point that sometimes those nominations are not entirely within my power.
Okay. We've got just under 5 minutes left before we are going to take a short break, and then we are going to change a couple of the ministers here. But while the Health Minister is here, and it's a question for the Chief Minister and the Health Minister, could you explain to the Orchard House patients and their families why no acute facility fit for purpose has been built in their time in office, despite the urgency for one being known since before they sat in their roles? The Nightingale Hospital shows how quickly you can do it.
I entirely understand the frustration expressed in that question, and the question is right. It's something we have known from the beginning, and it's been a concern of mine that it has taken so long. We have pressed and pressed for this work, and it's being done. Building is going on right now. It's going to complete next year, unfortunately, because it does take time. But it has been a frustration. And I recognise that we haven't had ideal conditions in which to house patients. But the Nightingale Hospital was something completely different. That wasn't a permanent facility, and it was to rescue the island in a life and death situation. So we were able to say that must happen without the necessary planning consents and building controls. It was needed in a life and death situation. What's needed for an acute mental health centre must follow all the protocols and be built to the highest standards.
Sure. Chief Minister.
I can't add anything to that, to be honest. I think Richard's nailed it. And it is a matter of regret, we know that. But at least the work is happening.
Okay, I think final question before we take a break for the Education Minister. And could you explain why higher education funding review, as in the government plan, would be out by the end of Q1, why it hasn't appeared? Could you also say when it will appear?
So the higher education funding review, it has gone to scrutiny. I will make sure it is out.
I think you've had some emails on this, according to the question here.
Have I? Well, it's been quite a busy time recently, but I will have it out soon. I'll get it out next week.
Okay, thank you very much. We are going to take a break now. So we've been talking for an hour, and we've had my thanks to the two panel guests who'll be leaving us now after their hour in the hot seats. That's Deputy Richard Renouf, the Health and Social Services Minister, and Deputy Scott Wickenden from Education and Children. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. We will be back very soon with Deputy Kevin Lewis, the Infrastructure Minister, and Deputy Gregory Guida from Home Affairs. So do stay tuned and do keep your questions coming in.
Good morning, you're listening to Channel 183. Let's have this tune now to kick off your day.
right way and control is kept.
Deputy Susie Pennell, thank you so much for joining us on the programme tonight.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Good morning, my name's Darcy Kelly. It is another beautiful day here in Jersey.
Welcome back to this final edition of Ask the Ministers before the June elections. There are loads of questions and topics that we're going through tonight. It's your chance really to ask the ministers here what you think of the last 4 years or so of this government before it fades away and a new one is elected this summer. So still with me is the Chief Minister, Senator John Fondré, the Deputy Chief Minister, Senator Lyndon Farnham. We're also joined by the Infrastructure Minister, Deputy Kevin Lewis, and the Home Affairs Minister, Deputy Gregory Guida. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. So we're going to go straight into questions that we've been sent through. And if you do want to ask some questions, the details are on the screen. It's www.slido.com, #AskTheMinisters. And the first one, in 2018, Chief Minister, you stated in your manifesto that your top priorities included achieving greater value for money. When you said it, did you mean it?
Yes. And oddly enough, although we get criticised for increase in spend, and we've talked about, I'm pointing where Deputy Wickenden was previously, the investment in things in education, health, etc., which obviously adds to the spend side of things. In addition, we have actually achieved, or are on track to achieve, around at the moment 70 million. That's recurring expenditure, and there are further pressures on top, further pressure to keep, that expenditure under review and to keep trying to squeeze it. On top of that, as I said, I pointed at Cyril Markle in terms of the construction that's happening there. When that's implemented, that should be saving us around between £6 and £7 million a year, excluding productivity, which could take it up to £10-15 million a year recurring. On top of that, we are actively, the states have approved it, seeking to do the refinancing, or what we call the pre-87 debt. Over the next 30 years, that will save us around £300 million. We will only know these figures properly when we know what rates we can achieve. And over 100 years, it was projected to be around 3.2, 3.5, 3.6 billion pounds. Now, the point is that, and that's on top of the 70 million odd that I was talking about. So, yes, we've got to keep the focus. It will get harder, particularly 23 and 24 will be harder to achieve, but we can keep driving through those efficiencies. What we at the moment have done, particularly with the impact of COVID, is essentially reapplied those savings elsewhere within the organisation.
Okay. So we've got another question now, and the question is simply, why should any old person vote for the current government to remain in office? And I think this is sort of driving at why should the elderly, why should they vote in more of the same next time round? So it's sort of judging the government on how it's looked after older people. So let's bring in our newcomers. Deputy Gregory Guida, do you think that the government has done enough for older people?
Sorry, it's difficult for me to say. It's not really something I deal with. I think we've treated the whole population as well as we could. I know that we've done. One of the reasons that we've tried to save in so many places in the government is that we had goals that we wanted to achieve, and we had no new budget to do it. So the goals were principally in education, mental health, and health in general. And I think that anything that goes into health is going to be extremely useful to older people. So it's something that we have done, and we have squeezed one part of the government to make sure that we could develop that other more important part.
David Lewis, do you think the government has done enough? Why should older people vote for?
We've done quite a bit. Obviously, there's always more to be done. We have to make sure that everybody's looked after well from a health point of view. Plus, we have to make sure that pensions are more than adequate for people to survive. The cost of living is going up, so we have to make sure that pensions keep pace with that. The price of food is going up all the time. So we have to make sure that people are well taken care of.
And Deputy Chief Minister, same question.
Well, I would hope all islanders, and especially our senior citizens, will never lose sight of despite the challenges, the quality of life we have here in Jersey, our unique culture, our parish systems, parish particularly are strong at working with the community. We see some fantastic initiatives in homes and facilities for senior citizens. And we've recently today, Chief Minister and others have been discussing how we can quickly act to help alleviate the increases in RPI. Interestingly enough, and this is quite alarming news insofar, out of the RPI figure, we've got the overlying RPI figure of 6%. The RPI-X, that is the figure without bank interest and mortgage interest, and that's deducted simply because interest is a tool used by the Bank of England to control inflation. That's why that figure. But RPI pension is 6.2%. So it's the pensioners are feeling the pinch the most, and we've got straight onto that, and we're discussing how we might alleviate that. But I think the question is, despite the challenges, we must always look to the qualities of living in a politically stable and financially secure and safe environment.
Okay. Sorry.
I was going to say also, don't forget, a lot of the things we've gone through has been around long term, and which is about putting the future in place for our children and grandchildren type of thing. So it depends on your view and the elderly and what their relationship with the family and things like that. However, don't forget, number one, that during COVID, an awful lot of what we did was about protecting the vulnerable. And actually, on the basis of where we are, I believe to the best of our ability we succeeded. Secondly, and actually when we had the change in Housing Minister, the Housing Minister is also the Housing Minister for Housing and Communities. And that was very specifically in my mind, because actually I do think we should be doing more for the elderly. He's also been focusing on housing, but if that post continues, then there will be, for the first time ever, actually a dedicated position around that. And then on top of that, in terms of funding, don't forget of the 11 or 12,000 people I referenced that we have helped, and particularly are imminently payments are going to be received this week or next week. In terms of the cost of living crisis, that does include all the eligible pensioners, and there are quite a number of them. So we have taken some steps. The Spend Local card obviously went to everybody, but on top of that, we actually at that point we gave an extra £100 to everyone yes, on income support, but also I think what's called pension plus. So, and from memory, I think that was in total about 16,000. I might be wrong. It was many thousands of people. So I think the point is we have tried to help where we can, but there is more we can do. Always more we can do, and not forgetting, by the way, in terms of health and the steps we're putting in place. And maybe a controversial comment, given that the health minister is now not here, is the Jersey Care model is designed to deal with the ageing population and is designed then to make health more accessible to elderly people. So I hope that's succinct, but I hope that gives some flavour of what we've been trying to do.
Okay, so more general questions coming up now. I think we'll sort of focus more towards infrastructure and environment for a little bit at least. Do ministers agree that trying to zone a marine national park as part of the island plan is greenwashing? And will the ministers agree that an evidence-based marine park designated under a new law is the best way forward?
I wouldn't mind taking that one, actually, as I was...
As an assistant Minister of Environment.
Extremely, absolutely. Extremely involved in this. We tried to discuss the theme of a marine national park, and we've done it before, and it was a mistake before when we had the coastal national park. We gave something a name without actually giving it substance. And that's that. I wouldn't call it greenwashing because that was not the intention. In either case, it was the intention was not to pretend to do something, but it was giving it a name before actually deciding what we wanted to do with it. I think yesterday we got the Portelet Bay no-take zone voted. It's tiny. It's very, very tiny. But it's the first no-take zone in Jersey, and it's the fourth no-take zone in the UK. So it's something that is quite rare, but that is how you do it. This is the first step in really having full protection for marine nature in Jersey. And getting to the marine park starts with that and then expands through other zones. We have other protected zones like no mobile gear zones and things like that. So when you have enough of those, you say that's the national park or that's the marine national park, and that's how you do it. So we're getting there. We're on the way.
As the Infrastructure Minister, Deputy Lewis, obviously it's down to you and your teams that pollution isn't discharged into these almost pristine marine areas that we have around the island.
Absolutely. We've got a brand new sewage treatment works coming online in early 2027. This is a massive investment in the island. It's my desire to get as many people as possible on the island on main drains, which goes to all four corners of the island. There's, I think we're up to about 96% on main drains at the moment. We want to get everybody off soakaways, tight tanks, and just to make sure that everything goes through the sewage treatment works, which will be a brand new facility, and to make sure that water that does go into the bay is purified and it's as clean as we can get it. But there's obviously other factors involved which would fall under sort of Gregory, if you like, with his environmental hat, that we have to make sure that nitrates on the land are kept to a minimum so that we don't get the huge algae blooms that we've been having over the years in St Aubyn's Bay. My team at Infrastructure do their very best to clean the beaches, and they're a great team, but they can only do so much. We're reliant so much on the weather, and we get the money basically from Lyndon's department to clean the beaches, and we clean the beaches on behalf of them, of tourism. But like everybody else, we want golden sandy beaches. We don't want green billiard tables there, and it's a nuisance. It's horrible. It's smelly, and we'll do whatever we can to get rid of it. But say we can only do so much. We're at the bottom end, if you like, of the problem, and is that we're cleaning up the mess. But it's something that happens all over the world. That from Australia, New Zealand, United States of America, if you've got intensive agriculture next to the coast, these algae blooms do seem to occur. But as I say, we're doing our very best. We're working across various departments to get rid of it and eliminate the problem.
Okay. We're going to stay with infrastructure. Simple question. There's quite a lot of controversy when Broad Street closed. still closed to through traffic during most of the day. Why is that? Is there an intention to reopen it?
Well, I have to abide by the will of the Assembly, and the will of the Assembly was to, they took a vote, Constables and Haley brought a proposition to say that it should be closed, and I have to obey the will of the Assembly. I did argue the point that we needed to take buses down there because a lot of people, you mentioned senior citizens, a lot of senior citizens want to be dropped off there to do their shopping in town and picked up there. Plus, the Chief Minister has kindly sponsored the new hopper bus, which will be coming online in a not too distant future, which will link up all areas within town so that we can get a really good service going within town and the whole island as a whole.
Does that mess up traffic flows as far as you and your department
Not
are
too
concerned?
much, but it's you can't. I've viewed sort of roads leading through town as arteries, and if you start shutting down too many arteries, it's got to go somewhere else. A classic example is recently we had to close Arve Depart because the road was in bad need of resurfacing. So much work had been done in the roads, laying pipes through various services over the years, that we needed to close Arve Depart for safety reasons while we resurfaced the road. Now this obviously caused complete and utter gridlock on La Route de Forts and people coming into work in town from the east. So now that's open again, that's alleviated that pressure. But I'm very conscious that these things do have a knock-on effect. A few years ago we had the rockfall on Mount Bingham, and that took about 3 months to fix. People think that Mount Bingham was a minor road, but in fact it's a major road. That we had heavy rain on several days when Mount Bingham was closed, and the island sort of ground to a halt on several occasions. But you know, the good thing is 30,000 tons of rock fell into the road. Nobody was killed, nobody was injured, and we have to be grateful for that. But we had 7 guys from Geomarine rope access team hanging off ropes, drilling into the granite just to secure pins to make sure nothing else came down. And that was done an excellent job in record time, and we got the road reopened again. So as I say, they're vital arteries that we have to keep open.
I think the point about Broad Street actually as well is that how serious are we about mitigating the impact of the car? So as Kevin kindly said, I've been very keen, and we've agreed that we've got the hopper bus starting. That's been something, blimey, that's been, I think, asked for about the last 10 years, if not longer. And in the end, we said, look, let's cut to the chase, let's find the funding, let's trial it. I think we're trialing it for 3 years, aren't we? But either you're serious and say, yes, we do recognise that we are very car dependent on this island, i.e. addicted to our cars, and I use that word to me, okay, or to apply to me, and therefore how do you change that habit? And part of that is, I think, around trying these things. Broad Street, I think, is one that's going to be, it's still an ongoing experiment, for want of a better expression. I know I was walking up there at sort of dusk one day relatively recently, and there were half a dozen people walking up in front of me. 4 children, youngsters, went straight past on scooters. It was great. St Helier are looking to start, I think, some form of market thing, I think, over the weekend. So it's got the potential to, again, just revitalise in a different way that area, rather than being sort of a rat run. What you've, I think, got to deal with is there will be, I think there are 1 or 2 minor tweaks that can, again, ease things for people in that particular area. And don't forget as well, you're going to be having potentially quite a large residential development going there. You know, there's a lot of potential for that area to be vastly improved. But, you know, we can take the choice. If you're not serious about dealing with the impact of the car, then let's not bother.
Okay. Back to the environment, and there's a question from Glyn Mitchell, who says, congratulations on achieving 0.0001% of the Sustainable Development Goal 14, making Portlet a no-take bay. If you get re-elected, how do you propose to achieve 100% of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals previous Government of Jersey have committed Jersey to achieve before 2030? Do you agree policies should be harmonised with nature?
Yes, we should definitely. It's not something that we've been very good at. I will accept the criticism quite easily, and certainly not something that has been at the forefront in the last 4 years. We've had enough crises to deal with. So some things we've done, but there is still a lot to be done. We've tried to bring in things that were necessary. For example, the wildlife law is a very, very strong base. It's still not completely enacted. We still need all the guidance and all the licensing to come out, and we need the enforcement to exist. But it is things that are being put in train right now, and that will come out, in the coming months. It takes time, and it has taken more time this term than any other time in Jersey. We've just had to weather crisis after crisis. So it is something that we're working on. It is not something that Jersey has a very good history of, but I hope we can do much better in the future.
It's interesting because a lot of businesses are now singing from that hymn sheet, aren't they? They are making statements about ESG and sustainability.
Yes, some. I am not sure that it's something that is very, very sincere in Jersey. We've got some very, very strong environmentalists. We've got some very good ones. But I don't think that Jersey in general is as keen on the environment as it really should be, because we benefit from it tremendously. 50% of the pleasure of living on that island is the environment, is the natural environment. And that's what I call the environment. Sorry, it's not the planning term environment, it's the natural environment I'm talking about. So half the pleasure of living in Jersey is the natural environment, and we haven't taken as good care of it. Sorry, we haven't taken as good care of it as we should have, and it's certainly something that we should do. I'd like to step in right now because we're talking about the achievements of this government or the non-achievements of this government, and there's something quite important about the way this one was run, and people need to realize that. You get into office, you get elected, you end up in the government. It's quite nice. Usually, you look at the tasks at hand, and you say, well, I could do this, we'd have it in 6 months, people would be very happy. I could do that, we'd have it in 3 years, people would be happy, it would be just in time for the elections, I'd get so many votes. And this is not at all what we've done. This government was really special because basically we took the Jersey to-do list and we went, Fort Regent, that will take 15 years to sort. Needs to be started now. In 3 years' time, in 3.5 years' time, we'll have done the basic study. So no kudos, no votes, nothing out of it. But if you don't start it, it's not going to happen. And we've done that. For the whole list, we've taken everything that needed doing in Jersey, and it didn't matter if it was something that we could do in 1 year or something that we needed 20 years to do. We've started it. And I don't know if it was silly, if it was idiotic on our part to do that and not gather as many votes as we can and make everybody, as many people as happy as possible. We took the list and just took one thing after the other and did what needed to be done on this. So 70 or 80% of the stuff we started is multi-generational. The next government, and probably the one after that, will have to do it. We've fought like mad to have a hospital in Jersey. Like mad. You wouldn't believe how much we had to fight to get a hospital in Jersey. I bet my political career on it in the Assembly. I told the opposition, you help me with this vote, and I'll disappear, I'll be out of your way to get the votes that we needed to get a hospital going. We won't be there when it opens. We won't be at the inauguration, but somebody needed to do that. So I think it's quite important when we look at those things, and try to establish how much this government has done, to think that all the things we started that needed starting, and that not everybody had the courage to start because there was no return in it.
We're going to move on to your main portfolio, Home Affairs now, as a question, asking you, would you be able to explain why you're reluctant to give pre-conviction powers to the police and courts, in particular with regard to domestic abuse law?
That's an interesting question. When we created the domestic abuse law, we basically gave it belt and braces. So we looked at the Scottish system, which had a domestic abuse offence, which gave rights of arrest to the police if they suspected that there was domestic abuse. And then we looked at the British system, which doesn't have a domestic abuse offence, but gather lots of different offences under that umbrella, but gives pre-charge and pre-conviction powers to the police. And we put both in it. The problem is that Jersey doesn't have a history of instant disposal. We don't even have parking fines. So this notion of the police catches you and lets you go with a £100 fine or a slap on the wrist, it doesn't exist in Jersey. You end up in a parish hall, which is also not an instant disposal, or you end up charged and in front of the magistrate's court. And very, very often, most of the stuff that we do actually ends up in the royal court. So we don't have this legal history of instant disposal. So when we built up the law, again, we put it, we gave it belts and braces, and then looked at the judiciary, and they told us, well, this is going to be very, very difficult here. This is a complete novelty. Why don't we start with the offence, which is new, which is not something that is very common. There are not many countries which have a definite offence, a specific offence of domestic abuse. So let's start with that, and then we will see what we can do. And especially because instant disposal still is a problem in Jersey, and we should look at it as a whole. So, for example, we have harassment notices, and they don't mean anything. We need to strengthen them. We need to give them teeth. That's an instant disposal that would be really useful. If we design them, we can have parking fines, we can have harassment notices that actually serve a purpose, and we can have domestic protection notices that actually serve a purpose. So unfortunately, that will be a job for the next minister. Okay. But the domestic abuse law is a very good law, and I'll try to bring it to more.
Okay, thank you. Right, sustainable transport next, and after the Deputy Chief Minister saying that he's cycling a lot more at the moment, it seems the weather's improved enough for you, Minister. Jersey could be a beacon for sustainable transportation. Should there be a safe cycle path between every parish to reduce conflict between cars and bikes and improve our cycle network and health? Infrastructure Minister.
Absolutely. I would dearly love that, but achieving that is somewhat difficult. We inherited, obviously, the Western railway routes all the way from Corbière, which now comes all the way down through to Havre de Pars. But everything we do, because the island slopes from north to south, all the valleys run from north to south, and the main bulk of the population lives in the south. So everything we do is a retrofit, that we have to knock something down or move something in order to put a cycle route through. We tried it in town, obviously, and that is working very well. We've just opened up a cycle route on Snow Hill, Mulcaster Street, Snow Hill, and that's an experiment at the moment to see how it goes.
It's a bit of an experiment.
It is an experiment. We have to try this.
I stopped somebody getting knocked down by a cyclist going the wrong way down it the other day.
Well, people are supposed to cycle down with the traffic, obviously, but the cycle against the traffic, they're in the cycle lane.
Yeah,
coming
but this
up.
was someone doing the opposite as they should do.
You will always have somebody who doesn't obey the rules, and sadly that's the way of the world.
But people will scratch their head and look at that. It was rather like the green lines painted in some of the roads in St Helier, which I know wasn't your department, which appeared about 15, 20 years ago, which are still there, which go against the traffic.
Yes.
These things don't really help the argument when you're trying to...
I believe that was a St Helier initiative.
It was, but I mean, this is similar, isn't it? Because it's Snow Hill.
Well, this is completely separate, and there's a demarcation there,
Sure.
so people know that is completely separate. But I'm very keen on safer routes to school, for instance, and we've done 2 in St Saviour recently, Bagatelle Lane, which infrastructure put forward, designed and built, and also Bell Air Lane, which the parish of St Saviour put together with consultants, which obviously we approved and assisted on. And also there's a few now down in St Clement. But I'd like to expand that. I'd like children to be able to cycle to school. In the parish of St Saviour, where I'm also a deputy, for instance, we have 11 schools in and around the parish. and the morning rush hour, it can be a little dangerous for cyclists. So, and it's people take a quantum leap in their thinking regarding children cycling to school. They think it's not dangerous, so they drive their children to school, thereby exacerbating that danger for other children. So if we could have some segregation there, that would be absolutely brilliant. We do have, obviously, the school bus service and the new student travel cards, but I would like to see more people on cycles. I get accused of trying to force people onto bikes, which is not the case, because the more people that cycle, the less vehicles are on the road. So it's a win-win for both parties. But we do have a lot of work to do with that. But I do have a team at Infrastructure modelling various routes, especially going east. And obviously we're looking at routes into town and through St Helier.
How do you de-escalate the tension and the conflict there sometimes is between different road users? And it's pedestrians, it's cyclists, it's vehicle drivers as well. There's obviously an education piece. There's providing the safe routes. There's thinking carefully about where to put them and whether they'll work or not. Is there something that, for instance, the Home Affairs, the police, they must have a part to play in some of this, because
we just enforce the highway code is not our.
But people see it being broken every day.
Sorry?
People see it being broken every day.
Yes, it's very difficult when pedestrians or cyclists break the law. It's actually extremely difficult to enforce this. So it happens sometimes, but it's just physically difficult.
Okay, we'll move on to some economy questions now, but it's kind of cycling related, because this question for you, Senator Farnham. Is the Super League Triathlon in Jersey, is it staying for good? And it's also well done, Senator Farnham, for putting Jersey on the map with this in the first place all those years ago. Is it staying for good? It was here for 5 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll deal with that last, if I may, because it's also coming through difficult times with COVID. It's had to completely readjust and restructure. So it's been absolutely brilliant for Jersey. It's showcased Jersey around the world because it goes out to a global market via international global television, and it introduces Jersey to new generations of citizens as a great location for sport, as opposed to an offshore finance centre or a tourism destination. So I think it's helping us with our branding, and of course that was very much Super League Triathlon was to demonstrate how successful it can be to start putting on larger events outside of the main season in the shoulder months, to fill up the tourism capacity where we have it between sort of end of September and March time. And the new tourism strategy, which is about to be published during the course of this government, which we've been working, which is more of a white paper actually, which sets some foundations for tourism, is very sets clear objectives to develop sporting and other types of events throughout the winter months to make our tourism industry more productive and fill up those beds where it has capacity. I think we might take a break from Super League this year, and it will come back next year. We've had we're in an ongoing arrangement with them, but I think there is some pressure on key sponsors. The main grant for Super League from Jersey is £250,000. In addition to that, we provide support through Visit Jersey and Locate Jersey. The event costs over £1 million to stage. And I know on the back of Brexit, pandemic, and of course other geopolitical challenges, sponsorship for those larger events is a bit challenging. So I think this year, although it's not actually confirmed yet, we might be taking a break from Super League, but hopefully we'll see it back in the future.
Okay, I'm sure many people will be interested to hear more about that. Figures released today, we've spoken about this already, show that inflation is now at 6%. You've spoken about some of the measures which you're working on at the moment. So what can be brought in to bring this down? And I think, urgency is key here.
Well, yes, Social Security Minister has introduced some support for islanders, which is targeted, and I think we're keen, and all the economic advice points to making sure the support we do give goes to people who need it, rather than giving 2.5p litre off somebody filling up their Aston Martin. We'd rather use that money to go somewhere else. What the states can do actually to provide a limited support is make sure we fully understand the implications of indirect taxes and duties when we apply them to goods. I don't think we really give a thought to what it's going to do to the overlying RPI figure when we put duty on fuel or alcohol or tobacco. We're very tuned into the health impacts of that. And we keep doing it, yes, but we need to understand that. We need to make sure that we're not overtaxing, and we're covering our expenses. Of course, there is a separate argument, and the health minister's not here, but he would challenge me strongly and say, well, I think we need to put, the people's health trumps, very small increases in the cost of living. It's the same with the charges government makes for services they provide. We need to fully understand what impact they have and keep those to a minimum. We also need to continue to support and heavily promote competition. We separated the Competition Authority from the Channel Islands arrangement. We now have a fully focused Jersey Competition Authority, which is focusing purely on encouraging and driving out greater competition across all sectors of the economy. So those are the key areas we're working on.
Okay, well, you mentioned Aston Martins, and it's not just people with Aston Martins who are feeling the pinch with fuel duty. Chief Minister, do you agree that a fuel duty cut is needed to help hard-pressed consumers? Is the government really going into the election having done nothing for lower and middle income earners?
Well, I'm going to obviously challenge the question. I noticed from ATF Fuels. So short answer is no, I don't agree, because as we've said already, it's in our gift already as consumers to go to the petrol stations, basically, that have the cheaper fuel. If the spread of price is 30p a litre and more, depending whether it's unleaded or diesel, which it is, that was what the Jersey Consumer Council website was saying, I think about 2 weeks ago, I haven't looked at it this week, then we're already in our gift, rather than the petition, the argument about taking 2.5 pence off, which we don't actually know is going to be passed on to the consumer already. That's point one. Point two, is the government really going into the election having done nothing for lower and middle income earners? Whoever's asked the question hasn't been listening to what we said over the last few weeks and even tonight, when actually we've already put stuff in place. We've put £2.2 million, I think it is, to help lower earners particularly. That's happening, and it's being paid out, as I said, within, I think actually starts being paid out tomorrow. On top of that, now, where I think we do have an issue, and it will take slightly longer to address, is those who, what I'll call at the lower end of middle Jersey, for want of a better expression. That might be the ones who are just on the cusp of, do they get caught by paying tax? They don't get income support. I do agree we have to do something there. And what we've actually asked now, my preference, I've asked officials to look at that, is could we do something around like the spend local card type of thing in a targeted way. Anyway, we're going to come back on that. As Lyndon has said, the advice we've had even tonight, before we came into this meeting, was that we've got to make sure that what we do is targeted. So we have done things. I don't agree with the fuel duty for the reasons I've just elaborated, which I'm sure won't find much favour of ATF, but sorry, that's the advice, very clear advice we've been getting. If the spread is 30p difference, 2.5p is not going to make any difference whatsoever. And then, as I said, we've got further work, because it's slightly more complicated, to see what we can do to help what I'll call the lower end of Middle Jersey.
Okay. Question about parental leave policies now. They've been aimed at removing bias and improve parental rights. There are still employers providing different leave rights between employees. Should we clarify on the law the intent of parity amongst parents and demand that businesses apply a consistent approach across, irrespective of gender? Senator Farnham.
I think we've seen significant progress in legislation surrounding employment, family-friendly legislation, and it's important that we put the highest standards in as a starting point, and then of course I'm not sure we can enforce over and above those standards what business. I'm trying to read the question. My eyesight's not too good from this distance. What employers do above that, but it's very much an employee's market at the moment, and I know of some very, very good examples of employers going above and beyond to provide, or should we say, removing. Sorry, I can't see. Can somebody remove? Yeah, removing the bias and providing much more, much fairer and consistent policies. I'm not sure if that's answered the question. I think I'm agreeing with it. Yes, but we have moved. We have come quite a long way with our rules on that. But of course, there is also a juxtaposition, because there are employers struggling in certain sectors to find staff, and we've seen businesses closing as well. And of course, the cost of employing staff and bringing people in post-Brexit on work permits is together with the wage spirals is fueling inflation. So there is pushback from certain sectors not to put too many further demands on employment legislation. But we are only moving in one direction.
Okay. We're going to move through some of the questions now, which are heading to the top of the list. First one, how does the panel explain the growth in the civil service? It was supposed to have shrunk, but we hear it went up. 5,000?
I'm not too sure it went where it's been said that we would shrink it in this time.
Well, I thought that's what Charlie Parker was brought in to do.
Well, there's a distinction. So let's go down the lines here. Number one is, I think and
according to this, it's Charles Parker asking the
yes,
question.
I saw that one. Which, funny enough, I'm not sure I believe that or not. But anyway, when we came in, and the analogy has been used a number of times, it's a bit like buying a restaurant and suddenly finding out you haven't got a kitchen attached. There have been sometimes the lack of investment, so IT systems, whatever it is, have not been invested in for a long time. So that has been where a lot of the spend has been about getting things into place, which are actually, again, long-term decisions that Gregory alluded to, which will bring benefits in the future, hopefully cost reduction, but also the services that islanders would expect to receive in an organisation fit for the 21st century, which frankly we were not. Now, if I look at the actual numbers, and I know you said, I think you quoted 1,000. What you've got to remember, I can't actually remember what the number is. I think it's 880 something. Point being is that is counting an individual who might do 1 hour. Well, I'm going to exaggerate, 1 hour a week for the sake of argument, and another individual who does a full week will each be counted as would there be 2 people. What we look at is what's called full-time equivalents. That's taking people on part-time and all the rest of it, and turning them into as if to 2 people on part-time would be 1 employee. So if I look at those numbers, essentially we said, for example, in the plan, it's all budgeted for, that we would look at reducing, for example, reliance on agency staff because they're more expensive, and bring people in on a permanent basis because that's actually cheaper. So actually, of the increase, 200 were frontline services at police, nurses. We heard about the point about stress and pressure on health staff. There is more to do in these areas, okay, but police, nurses, mental health, children's services. COVID response and public health as a permanent basis, bear in mind where we've been, 53. Support functions, yep, it's treasuries, revenue jersey, technology, what we talked about, just under 200. Actually, on top of that, there are 200 on short-term contacts, including COVID helpline, test and trace. Now, if you're telling me in those numbers that you don't want, and bear in mind these numbers are at the end of December, when our numbers were going up again, we'd slowed down the the contact tracing team, and then we had to build them up again. If you're saying that people didn't want that resource in place, particularly at the end of last year, or even earlier in the year, frankly, I'm afraid they're wrong. So it is budgeted for. Part of it is actually getting the resource in place to give the services to the public we need. Part of it has been around, as I said, 50% of the permanent increase is police, nurses, mental health and children's services. Those are all areas where we had deficiencies. And actually, don't forget, we have still more work to do in there.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Deputy Guida, could you comment on how the fishing dispute with France Well, it says has developed this year. Are we through the worst?
It slowed down a little bit. One of the big fights was licenses. So the new system meant that people who historically fished in Jersey and could prove it would get a license. And the French didn't quite agree with the system of selection and also decided to use it for political reasons. So they made a very, very big fuss of it. It went all the way to the president when it's a absolutely microscopic piece of their economy. So they made a lot about it, and there was a very, very big fight on something that was not terribly important, and frankly, something that was very easy to verify, to make it an international issue where all they needed to do was send somebody to our office and look at the paperwork. Would have been much, much easier. And I could go on further because there are some legal discrepancies that would have been very interesting to explore on their side. The next step, and by far the most important, is nature and extent. So once you've given a license, what is it a license for? Because a license is actually a restriction on your fishing. It allows you to fish a certain area, a certain number of days, and certain species or way of fishing, métier. And this is what we're negotiating now. So when I say we're negotiating, of course, this is the UK negotiating with Europe. So we tell the UK what we think they should be doing. The UK tells the EU how the crown dependencies want it, and then the EU eventually asks other countries like France if they're happy with that, and then it comes back. So we are now negotiating nature and extent. And it slowed down a little bit because the UK would like to do the negotiation for all the crown dependencies at once, and they're gathering information from the Isle of Man and from Guernsey to put up a file for the EU imminently.
Okay.
So that's where we are now.
Okay, thank you. We'll rattle through some more questions now. Tricky one, this one, because it kind of assumes that most of you on the panel don't live in St Helier or in places that are connected to the main sewer system. And that's what the question is. How many of the panel live within the assumed capital of Jersey or are connected to the main sewer system, as previously discussed, referring to tight tanks? Not too many, the questioner says. He suspects, as the sewer system does not extend to the minister's preferred home parishes. Well, you can take that one, and you can you can berate the ministers who don't live in a parish that's connected to main drains.
Centre is. I live in St Saviour, just around the corner from yourself, Chris, as you know. I am on main drains, and as I mentioned previously, I want to get as many people onto main drains as I can. The sewage plant that we have at the moment is coming to the end of its useful life. It's near capacity, not quite. But we're not going to add any more to it until we open the new plant in 2023. Then I would like a big push to get as many people on main drains as we can. As I say, I always say that the team down at Bellazan are like master distillers. They keep the old plant going, and the water that goes into the bay is yes. Well, it's like a whiskey, but not
one you'd want particularly.
But it's they do a wonderful job. Even with the ultraviolet cleaning, and the water is as clean as we can get it that goes out into the bay. But it's a lot of, it's operating 24/7, and I mean we just had the sense that we got to about 103,500 people bathing, washing, the loo, laundry, everything is going 24/7,
sure.
And it does a fantastic job.
I mean, we've had the issue of mains drains ever since, probably before former Deputy and then Constable of St John started raising it in the Assembly, as we know. It's still not quite. We're still not quite there. Is there the will in the government? Is there the money for your department to do it?
I'll say, but not at the moment. But until we finish the new sewerage plant, we can't really take any more online. St John's is an interesting one because we have a pocket plant up at St John, and that's working very, very, very well indeed. It's where the big problems are arising now is you have small hamlets that are on tight tanks, and obviously our mains drain pipes are in the road, in the nearest main road. So we have to get it from the hamlet to the road, which means going over farmland or under farmland, should I say, which needs agreement from the landowner. So I always suggest that they consult their parish constable, who may become an intermediary with the farmer, and negotiate sharing the costs between the various houses on this little hamlet to come under the farmer's land. But it does actually add, it is expensive, but it does add value to the house at the end of the day.
Just while we're talking about age-old issues that your department's been dealing with, is the Eastern Cycle route. The sections completed so far, says Andy, who's asked this question, are excellent, but it needs completing. Is there a target date?
It's ongoing work because, as I say, we inherited the Western Railway, but the Eastern Railway Company was sold off for housing, and houses were built all the way down the Eastern Railway track. So basically, we have to start again. It's a balancing act. I would dearly love a cycle to be able to cycle from the far west point to the far east point, but it is problematic. We can't take away traffic on the main road because around the St Clement area, it has been suggested closing one lane and having it one way, but there's probably about 9 or 10 different estates that come out onto the inner road and people want to go to town. So it is a major problem. But we do have, every time a new estate is built, we have cycle access through the estates, and which it's linking them all up. And I mentioned safer routes to school. I want to extend that as far east as I can as well.
Okay. Right, question for all of you, but Chief Minister, first of all, when we get a reformed Jersey-led government in June, will the panel be able to work with them? You've been there before, haven't you, Chief Minister? If re-elected, of course.
I think Gregory wanted to start on that one.
No,
actually.
I want the Chief Minister to start. We'll come to you. Go down the
I was
line.
going to say, I'm not too sure I go for the... I'm curious who Anonymous is, whether it's a present senator who might have a vested interest or one of 4 deputies. But anyway, I don't go for the premise of the when, I have to say. But actually, what I will say, look, in essence, Council Ministers as a whole is a, if you like, a coalition. We've worked incredibly well together as a team, and we had obviously members of Reform in that group. They chose to leave and walk away from the various problems that we had. But actually, all depending on the circumstances, I work with many people, and we just need to know what the lie of the land looks like. But I'm not too sure I'd go with the premise of the first word in that question. Or for anybody, anyway, because it's, we are in the hands of the electorate.
Senator Farnham, you're very much an independent member, aren't you?
I admire the optimism and yeah, of course I would. If we had a reformed Jersey-led government, of course I'd do everything I could to support the government, as I think we all do. But of course it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because if, for example, there was to be, I don't know, Lyndon Farnham-led government, I would expect Reform Jersey to reciprocate and provide the same support to me or the Alliance Party or the PFJ or whatever we've got now coming forward.
Deputy, if you're in that position?
Well, I'm an independent, but I work for the people of St Saviour and the people of Jersey as a whole. And I would work with whoever is in the big chair, as it were. I've had the privilege of working with several of my colleagues here for many, many years. But, who knows? We're in the hands of the electorate, as has been said.
Party chairman at the end, then.
Yes, well, I would be absolutely delighted to run Home Affairs under Chief Minister Mezek. It would be extraordinary. I mean, imagine working without a limit to your budget, being able to spend as much money as you want. I mean, we've been tightening our belt, for 4 years, and that was really, really difficult. But this notion that we could spend as much money as we could to have more ambulance crews, more fire appliances, it would be lovely. I would really love it. And so please, put me on the list for Home Affairs.
Well, that's a ringing endorsement. Right. So, quick fire questions. We've got a couple of minutes left, so probably only time for 2 more. Does the panel agree that we need new ideas and a fresh approach to take Jersey forward and deliver policies for a fairer island? It starts with you, Deputy Guida.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Does the panel agree that we need new ideas and a fresh approach to take Jersey forward and deliver policies for a fairer island?
That's a difficult one. I don't think we've changed terribly since we were elected 4 years ago. We started things, and as I've said, unfortunately, many of those take forever to do. We knew 4 years ago that we had a housing problem, and we started working on it 4 years ago, but that's how long it takes. The island plan was a necessary passage to open up greenfields and expand housing. We couldn't accelerate it. We did it as fast as we could, and we have opened up hundreds of houses in the island plan. The projects for Andium are the same. We had some when we started. We have many more now, but you cannot click your fingers and have 3,000 homes being built. So I don't think we need to change very much. We just need to be able to finish what we started, and things that just takes many years to do.
Okay, Deputy Lewis.
Well, as Gregory alluded to, that we are planting acorns that we're not going to see the benefit of, but it gets everything moving. We've had tremendous challenges over the last 4 years that we've really had to step up to the plate with. Obviously, Brexit was a challenge. COVID was a major challenge. We have Ukraine now, which may cause some shortages. So I think everyone has been really pulling well together, but there's obviously always more work to do, and we are doing it.
Okay, Senator Farnham.
Yeah,
you have to be quick.
Absolutely, yes, and that's why one of the very good reasons why we have elections every few years to get new people, new blood, new ideas, and every government I've served in, or every state I've been, has seen a number of very good and innovative ideas coming forward. We tend to forget them because they become part of our normal life, but if we look back at some of the great projects we've done in the past, some of them very controversial. Let's take Queen's Valley, for example. If we hadn't done them, where would we be now? So yeah, lots of new ideas, but also hang on to a bit of experience as well.
In terms of the fresh ideas, I think actually we have been pursuing quite a lot of fresh ideas and different things during our 4 years. Do we need to build upon that? Yes. If I can also say, because I'm sure it would be a delightful question that anybody would answer on the podium when we get there, is what are you going to do, but more importantly, how are you going to pay for it?
Okay, this is we are up against it. We've probably got a minute left, so final question. Do you feel that your term of office collectively has been a success, particularly when compared against the common strategic priorities set out in 2018? Chief Minister, start them off.
I'll start with the part at the end bit, which says, do you think they've at the very least improved? The short answer is yes. We have to accept, as I said, COVID took 2 years out of our plans. So from that perspective, taking that into account, we've absolutely improved on every one of those, what we call CSPs. We've put a lot of long-term thinking and projects in play, and we are seeing some of the benefit of those now, but a lot of the benefit will come through later.
Okay. Senator Farnham.
Probably been the toughest 4 years of my life, the last 2 years with COVID, extremely so. And I am extremely proud to have worked for the people of Jersey, but I think from my perspective, as the question says, for me, working with fellow ministers and officers to get that business support, that payroll support and business support measures in place which protected jobs and livelihood through the pandemic was something I shall always be very proud of.
Deputy Lewis?
And further to that, setting up Fort Regent as a vaccination centre, the team there have done an absolutely superb job. We're not out of the woods yet, but it's obviously COVID is on the decrease, and long may it remain so. We do recognise we have an ageing population, so we must do the best to keep both young and not so young fit and healthy.
Last word with you, Deputy Guida.
Well, we've been swimming against the current for several years, and the sad thing is that our biggest achievements will disappear. Test and trace was an international success. We've been doing it better than almost any other country in the world. In a year's time, nobody will remember what that was. So unfortunately, our best achievements will disappear. But there are many other things we've brought in. If I talk about Home Affairs, we've brought in a lot of legislation. We've weathered Brexit, and we're probably going to come out of it in a good position. So there are successes.
Okay, goodness me, we've overrun. Thank you very much to our panel, the ministers who've been with us this evening. Thank you very much indeed also to the team behind this and the studio who've been looking after us and putting us on the air. And also the 1,500 people on Facebook in Jersey who viewed, 150 in the UK, Guernsey, Portugal and France. I don't know when the next one of these will be. This is the last one before the next election. You may see some of the faces back here again, you may not. You may see some new ones after June. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this evening.